looks like we've got a good group here tonight.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Northern Kentucky History Hour. I'm your host for tonight, Heather Cook. Northern Kentucky History Hour is a project of Behringer-Crawford Museum, Northern Kentucky's History Museum. Behringer-Crawford Museum is supported in part by the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, Arts Wave, Kentucky Arts Council, Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, the Carol Ann and Ralph V. Hale Jr. U.S. Bank Foundation, and our members. If you're not yet a member of the museum, please consider joining for access to discounts and exclusive programming. You can learn more to join at bcmuseum.org. I would highly recommend it. It's such a great experience to come to the museum and be a member, and you really join the community of the members that we have there. Before we begin, we're going to go over a few reminders. Everyone's microphone has been muted so that we can all focus on the presentation. Feel free to turn your videos off or on if however you prefer, but if it is on, everybody else on the call can see you, even if the screen is being shared. If you have a question or a comment to share, you can type it into the chat and we will try to get to as many questions immediately following the presentation. There will also be a trivia question tonight. So the first respondents to enter the correct answer into the chat will win a Northern Kentucky History Hour pin. So let's meet our tonight's speaker. We do have Robin Bennett here. She's the 5th District Director for the Kentucky Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Historic Preservation Committee Chairperson for the Boone County DAR Chapter. She is a member of the Boone County Archives Commission and past local history associate at the Boone County Public Library. She has also been a member of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution since 2013 and holds membership in the National Society of the United States Daughters of 1812. She's the recipient of the 2021 Kentucky Society DAR Outstanding Volunteer Genealogist Award. Besides genealogy research, Bennett is passionate about historical preservation. She has organized and planned marker dedication ceremonies for 6 Revolutionary War veterans who lived and died in Boone County, Kentucky. Robin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here tonight to share information on the grave marking ceremony that recently happened. There's a lot of planning and preparation that goes into these events. And so I'm always happy to be able to share the event. It honors the veteran. It helps preserve our county's history, our community's history, and hopefully maybe someone will be encouraged tonight to think about planning a marker dedication ceremony for their ancestor. Anyone really can do it. So I am going to share my screen here. And we will get started. Okay, so I'm here tonight to talk about grave marking ceremonies. Like she said, I have done planned marker dedication ceremonies for 6 Revolutionary War veterans that died in Boone County. It was 5 different ceremonies I've planned. The reason it's 6 veterans is I planned and organized a ceremony in 2019 that was for 2 Revolutionary War brothers with the last name of Rouse, Jacob and Samuel Rouse. So I have been able and honored to do this for 6 different Revolutionary War veterans. The most recent ceremony that I planned and organized was on Saturday, October 30th, and the Boone County Chapter NSDAR and the Simon Kenton SAR joined me and others in honoring Private John Swindle, and we placed a memorial marker for him at Hopeful Lutheran Cemetery in Florence. This is a picture of the 2 markers that we dedicated on October 30th. The marker on the left is a marker that came from Veterans Affairs. whenever I'm planning a marker dedication ceremony, if I'm able, I try to get a marker from Veterans Affairs. There's no cost to it unless you have a cost to set the stone. The Department of Veterans Affairs will provide you with a marker for someone who served. And fortunately, in all 6 cases of veterans, I've been able to get a VA marker for them. The marker on the right in this picture is actually the stone that was provided by the DAR and SAR. The DAR provided the plaque that's on the left. My chapter paid for that. And then on the right is the SAR emblem that was provided by the Simon Kenton SAR and mounted on that stone. And we also purchased that stone. So what goes into planning one of these ceremonies? I actually start planning usually probably around 9 months in advance for one of these ceremonies. I have to start out by trying to decide on a patriot. There are a lot of patriots that actually lived and died in Boone County, Kentucky. And so I start my process with trying to figure out which patriot we're going to honor. Obviously, I'd like to eventually be able to honor all of them, but there are things that go into the process of deciding, can I prove his service in the Revolutionary War? Sometimes people in the community will say that they think that their ancestors served in the Revolutionary War, but we can't find proof of it. So I look at how hard it is to obtain proof, because I'm going to have proof of service to get the markers. Where will the funding for the event come from? My chapter donates a lot of the money to fund these events, but it's not always enough money. So sometimes I have to raise money from other sources. And if there's descendants, usually the descendants are more than willing to help chip in and pay for a marker for their ancestor. And I have to look at what my budget's going to be. Some of the ceremonies that I've organized, there were minimal costs. They were in a family cemetery. The SAR helped set the stone, and I got the stone donated in some cases. The most recent ceremony I planned probably cost a little bit over $800, which still, when you're placing a marker for a Revolutionary War veteran, I think is a very reasonable cost. And I asked myself where and when the marker will be placed. Those are some of the early decisions you need to make when planning an event. There's a lot of events in the fall. The calendar can get busy, and you need permission to place a marker. So when I apply for these markers through the Veterans Administration, I have to get permission from descendants. In some cases, there are ways to work around that. And I also need to get permission from the cemetery that I can place a marker there. So John Swindle, he is a patriot that we most recently honored. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about him. He was born circa 1746 in Culpeper County, Virginia, and he married Hannah Weaver around 1770 in Madison County, Virginia. Hannah was part of the Germana group. We think John Swindle was, we're not certain on that, but definitely Hannah Weaver was. And there are records of John Swindle being part of the Hebrew Lutheran Church in Madison County, Virginia, which is still there today. John Swindle eventually moved with his family to Boone County, Kentucky, and he died here the 20th of August, 1839. How do we know that he died here? Well, it's in his pension record. So that's how we know that. At the bottom of this screen, I put an excerpt from, it's called the Hebrew Communion List. It's actually in a book that was written by John Blankenbecker. And this just shows, and I wanted you to see the name and how different it can be. Here it says Johannes Swindle and wife Hannah communed at Hebrew Lutheran Church. And this was the 7th of April, 1776. So this is some information that I found. The Boone County Public Library actually has an entire shelf dedicated to Germana records. I also noted at the bottom of this screen, fold 3, because that is a great source to find military records, service records, and pension records. The record that you see on the right is from the National Archives, but like I said, I found it on fold 3. They have a lot of records. They're constantly adding records, but that came from fold 3, which you can get through the library. So many hours of research can go into finding the documents needed to get markers approved. When I apply for a VA marker, or I even apply for the plaque that you saw, the DAR plaque, I have to send information in to the VA. And I also have to send information into DAR that proves this man's service. I also have to show that he has a connection to the place where I want to place a marker. In the case of a marker from Veterans Affairs, it actually has to go in a cemetery. You cannot just place it at someone's home. You have to show that it can go in a family cemetery. It doesn't have to be a public cemetery, but you have to show that it is actually a cemetery where you're placing a VA marker. The DA marker, there's a little more freedom with that, and you can place it other places, but you do have to prove that this man actually served. And so I have to find a lot of documents to try to show their date of birth, their date of death, and their service. Here again is the picture of the marker, and it can sometimes take months for these applications to be approved. That's another reason that I try to send things in early, start the process early, because you just don't know how long it's going to take to get this approved. And there again, you can see the plaque on that stone that came from DAR, and I actually had to order that through an authorized dealer. So I get all my paperwork together and I send it in to DAR's national headquarters, and they send me back a letter that it's been approved, and they tell me exactly what needs to go on the marker. I don't have that choice. They give me the wording, and then I contact an authorized dealer, DAR dealer, and at the bottom of the screen there it says Best Stamp Company. They're in Louisville, and they're the ones that I've always worked with to purchase the DAR plaque. And once I send and purchase that, and I send them what DAR says has to go on the plaque, it can take at least another 8 weeks to get that plaque back. So, you know, I've had at least 2 or 3 months waiting on maybe approval and to, you know, find out what I have to put on the plaque, or if I'm going to get a VA stone. And then I have to order this plaque, and that's going to take maybe another 8 weeks, even longer. And then Lewin Monument Company in the top right, they are the company that I've been working with on my past couple events to get the stone. And they take these plaques. I get the plaque sent to me in the mail, or I pick it up in Louisville, and then they mount that to the stone and deliver it to the cemetery. So on the left of your screen is the invitation that I send out. By now, I've probably established a date for the event and a time, and probably about 8 weeks before the ceremony, I start sending out invitations. If you notice on this invitation, I have the Boone County Chapter Daughters of the American Revolution and Simon Kenton Chapter Sons of the American Revolution invite you to attend the Patriot Marker dedication ceremony. That's because I can't prove that John Swindle is actually buried at Hopeful Lutheran Cemetery where this marker is going. So I wanted to be really careful to call it a marker dedication ceremony, not a grave marking. So I'm just trying to tell you the difference between the two. It's possible that you may know the exact location of a Revolutionary War veteran who's deceased, and you want to place a marker for him. And in that case, you could call it a grave marking ceremony. But on mine, at least this last one, we did not know. So it was called a Patriot Marker dedication ceremony. So there's much to do in planning these events. A lot of things to think about. Like I said, you have the invitations. With the invitation that I just showed you, I also send out an invite for a floral tribute. If you're the regent of a DAR chapter or the president of an SAR chapter, it's customary to bring a wreath for the person you're honoring or remembering. And part of the ceremony, there are floral tributes, and I'll talk more about that later. So I have an invitation to the event, and then in some envelopes, I also put an additional invite to bring a wreath for the floral tributes. At the events that I've planned, there has been music. Most of the time they're singing a cappella, but we have patriotic music, and it just makes the ceremony very nice when everyone can enjoy hearing that. Or sometimes, like the last ceremony, we even sang along. There's a guest speaker. At the last ceremony, we actually had 2 guest speakers. I try to get the color guard to attend. So the color guard is part of the Sons of the American Revolution, and they dress in uniform, and they come and they bring their muskets, and they do the 3-gun salute as part of the ceremony, and flag. And it just makes the event nice. And they try to be very accurate in what they're in the uniform they wear. They want them to be historically accurate, and everything they do during the event. You have to coordinate parking. Most of the time that hasn't been a problem for us, but I did have one event that I planned where we had to have everyone park about a mile away from the event, and then have a shuttle transport people to the gravesite. Also, you may want to think of an alternative rain location. Every ceremony I had up until this year was outdoors. You want to try to have your event by the markers. This year, thank goodness, about 2 weeks before the event, I asked the pastor at Hopeful Lutheran Church if we could have permission to use the church in the event of rain. And thank goodness I did, because we had rain, and there had been a lot of rain in the day or two before the event. And the day of the event, it was just off and on mist and drizzle, but we felt like the cemetery was just so wet that we decided to go ahead and have the ceremony indoors. Now, the color guard did do their demonstration outside in the cemetery by the marker, but the ceremony was indoors, and it actually turned out to be very nice. My chapter usually always provides refreshments at the end of the event, and it's nice to have those. It kind of invites people to hang around and talk after the event. And a lot of times there are descendants who come from out of town for this event, and so it's nice for people to be able to not just head out, but talk about the event. And then marketing your event. You're going to the effort to plan this event and have music and a guest speaker and the color guard. So you want people to attend your event. You want them to attend for many reasons. It's a lot of work, but you also want them to be involved. And like I said, if you can get members of your community involved, then they feel like they're part of this, and they learn about the community's history. It's amazing to me how little we sometimes know about our community and what actually happened there. Maybe we think of the Revolutionary War happening in Massachusetts or in Virginia, but we don't think about it in our community. And we do have ties to the Revolutionary War in our community here. And we also have many Revolutionary War veterans who came here and died in our county and in the northern Kentucky area. So this is the inside of my program, and I just wanted to give you a chance to take a look at this and see what goes on during an event. At the top of this program, I put a note that the Cincinnati chapter, Sons of the American Revolution, they were going to be having a tactical demonstration. And it was really very nice. They came in about 45 minutes to an hour before the event. They started their demonstration. You'll see pictures of that in a minute. And like I said, that happened outside by the markers. And a large group gathered to watch them. And then when they were finished, everyone headed indoors into the church for the ceremony. And this is just, everyone gets a program when they come to the event. And this is the inside of the program so that they were able to follow along and know what was going to happen. So here's where we start out. And this is someone from the Cincinnati Color Guard. And he is out by the markers, and he is putting flag holders into the ground. He's got stakes he's putting in the ground that will hold the flags, the color guards flags. And here we are. On the right is right after I've arrived at the event. And I'm talking to a couple of people from the color guard. And I just want to make a note here. We don't have a dress rehearsal. So, you know, when I get to this event, there's a lot of things that have to be addressed the day of the event. So I have my papers prepared, and I'm just always giving last minute instructions. Things can change, like at this event. We thought the entire event and the ceremony would be outside, and we ended up moving the ceremony part indoors, but we're just going over things. This was my first time actually meeting this man who's standing next to me on the right of the screen, and so we're going over the events for the day. On the left part of your screen, you can see some members of the Cincinnati Color Guard. And the man who is closest to us in the picture, he is in historically accurate uniform, and his hat would tell someone that he was in the South Carolina military. That is one of the symbols for South Carolina. I had to ask someone that the other day because I knew it stood for something, but I wasn't sure what. And so I asked someone from the Cincinnati SAR, and he explained that to me. And sure enough, yes, that's what it is. Okay, so here's a picture of the people gathering to see the demonstrations before the ceremony. So as I said, the Cincinnati Color Guard had demonstrations in the cemetery, and there's quite a large group that's gathering to see that happen. On the left side of your screen, you may see some youth that look like they're in Army uniforms. They were part of the Boone County Civil Air Patrol, and a wonderful lady in my chapter invited them to attend and see if they would be willing to help us for the day. And it was just wonderful having them. They got to be part of the ceremony. They helped a great deal, but they also actually took part and carried flags with the color guard. Here's another picture of the Cincinnati Color Guard, and those uniforms, I don't know what they all represent, but they have meaning. And the color guard commander, who's up front in this picture, he may actually be talking about that. He talks about a lot of different things in his demonstration. One of the things that they sometimes talk about are the uniforms and why they look the way they do. Maybe if someone was from Virginia or Pennsylvania, they all have meaning. Here he is having a lecture on the battle practices. So he gave a lot of great information on actually how things they did when they were in battle. And right here is a picture of the Patriot firing line aiming at the enemy firing line. So they go through exactly what would have happened when they were in battle. And like I said, they try really hard to be very accurate with what they're doing. Now I'm going to show you a video clip of the bayonet charge that happened. And again, he is trying to show, and when he has them doing their bayonet charge, exactly how it would have been done.
Shoulder, fire up. That's about the speed of a...
I'll play it once more, but he's saying that's about the speed of a bayonet charge. So you can see how fast they're walking. They're not running. Someone may think that they'd actually be running, but they're not. They're walking. And he's saying this is about the speed. And you also notice that they're all in a line. There's not someone way out front or way in back. They're all in a line. And that was so they protected each other.
Shoulder, fire up. That's about the speed of a...
So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so things were wrapping up outside with the demonstrations. I had been inside the entire time getting things ready in the church. These are some of the ladies in my DAR chapter, and they also like to dress in period attire, and even some of the daughters of the members. And this is inside the church. Hopeful Lutheran actually has a newer sanctuary, but we decided to use the older sanctuary. We thought the stained glass windows were beautiful. We thought the wood was beautiful, the pews, and it was very nice. It was a little warm. There was a problem with the AC unit or the furnace that day, but in the end, it all worked out, and things cooled down eventually. And sometimes things like that just happen, but here we are setting up. This is right before the events, getting ready to start. And again, I just wanted to show that there's always last minute changes and things that need to be looked at. So I'm talking with two members of the SAR who have been involved in the event, and we're just making some changes. You usually have people who maybe don't tell you they're coming, and they show up and they bring a wreath and they want to be part of the floral tribute. So I have to add them to that. Also, maybe they're an elected official or the president of a state SAR society. So I want to add them to my introduction list. So I'm always making changes at the last minute, and I work with the members of SAR to make those changes. Here's a really nice shot of the flags the SAR bring and use. And the flags are just beautiful, and they're always part of the event and part of the color guard. And the SAR, they have indoor flags and they have outdoor flags. These were the indoor flags that they brought to use for this ceremony inside the church. There have been events in the past when we were outside that there were as many as 30 flags used. I would say at this event, they probably had about 20 flags that they brought in. Here's another view from the back of the church. You can see guests are starting to come in. The ceremony hasn't started yet, but they're getting their flags set up. The flags also, again, they all stand for something different. But people are filtering in, and we're just getting ready for the event. And it was just beautiful. This is on the right, the man in the red. He is the Kentucky Color Guard commander, and he was at the event, so he kind of he was in command. And you can see that he's talking to someone on the left from Simon Kenton, probably giving him instructions on, they line these flags up. Everything has a reason why they're doing it, from the flags they use to the order that they come in. There are some of the Boone County Civil Air Patrol cadets. And like I said, they got to take part and carry flags also, which was really nice. So now everybody's in there and we're ready for the ceremony to begin, and we have the call to order. So this is the president of the Simon Kenton Sons of the American Revolution, and I worked with them on this event, and usually it's their president that is the master of ceremonies of the event and does the call to order. So once we have the call to order, the flags are carried up and everyone stands when the flags are coming up. Most people place their hand over their heart when the American flag is coming through, and they're gonna take these up in front and they're gonna set them in stands. And there are the flags at the front of the church. Some of them had to go around on the side of the church. And you can also see from this picture, the church was pretty full that day. We had a really nice attendance at the event, very nice. Here's another picture that shows everyone in the church. You can see that there are a lot of men dressed in uniform. And also I wanted to note, you may see a sign on the seat at the front left. So I always have reserved seats for special guests. If someone is again, an elected official and they come to the event, I want to have a reserved seat for them. If the state DAR regent is present or the vice regent, I want to have a reserved seat for her. I want to have a reserved seat for anyone who may need to get out of their seat often and speak. So it's just another part of the planning process is to things in order and make sure you have reserved seat for special guests. We did have a special guest. We had a lot of special guests, but we were fortunate to have Kentucky State Senator John Swindle with us again. He has attended, I think he's attended every grave marking that I've organized, and it means so much to have one of our local elected officials come to these events and show support for us. And he did a great job. He's bringing us greetings here, and I always enjoy hearing what he has to say. Our next speaker was actually a fifth great grandson of John Swindle, Michael Rouse. He is a genealogy researcher. He's researched a lot on John Swindle and other Germana ancestors. And he told us about the life of John Swindle. So that is who we were there to honor. And it was really nice to hear about John Swindle and his life. And he did a great job talking to us about John Swindle. After he spoke is when we have the actual dedication of the markers. Normally, we would have been outside in the cemetery, and there would have been some type of cloth covering over the markers. And at the end of the dedication, they would have been unveiled. But since this ceremony was indoors, we just had the dedication inside the church, and there's a ritual that's read and a prayer. We had music at the event. Eliza Cole, who's also a distant descendant of John Swindle, she sang for us and she just did a great job. One of the songs was Battle Hymn of the Republic, and she actually even asked the audience to join in with her. After the music, we had our floral tributes, which is what I told you about. So this is where a president of an SAR chapter or a regent of a DAR chapter or even another organization brings a wreath to the ceremony, and it's part of the floral tributes. Now, if the ceremony had been outside, the wreaths would have been placed around the marker. And during the ceremony, whoever brought that wreath, I would call their name and their organization, and they would go up to their wreath that's by the marker, and they would bow or curtsy or salute. But because the ceremony was in the church, the wreaths were placed at the front of the church. With the ladies, a lot of times we have an SAR member escort them up to their wreath. And these are just pictures. There's another picture with the wreaths. I've had events where we've had at least 30 wreaths. I would say there were probably 20 different wreaths at this event. So that means 20 different chapters and organizations brought a wreath. And here is someone else going up. Just another picture. I mean, you can see it, it's just beautiful. It was a very nice ceremony, and it just, it felt really nice being there honoring John Swindle in the old sanctuary again at the church. After we have the floral tributes, there is a part of the ceremony where a member of the SAR goes over the significance of the SAR emblem. So all these things have meaning, and the SAR emblem, you probably saw that on one of the marker pictures. And I put a little clip art of it on here so you could see it, but they talk about what that actually means, what the eagles mean, the points on the emblem, what all of that means. And then after that is the nation's tribute, which is also known as the 13 folds of the flag, and a flag presentation. This is another special part of the ceremony. Someone from SAR goes over the folds of the flag as each fold is made. They're very careful when doing this. You can see they have gloves on in this picture. They make sure as they're folding the flag that they do each fold perfect, just right, and it's stiff. They make sure the creases are just right in it. And with each fold that's made, someone from the SAR is telling what that fold represents, because every fold has a meaning. Once they get this folded and it's folded perfectly, they're going to present it to someone. In the past, we have presented it to the oldest living descendant of the Patriot. But this year, the family requested that we present this flag to the youngest living descendant. So this is the 7th great grandson of the Patriot. And just because he's a minor and I didn't have written permissions, I used this picture where it's just the back of him. But it was a very touching moment. We called him up and he came forward and he was handed that flag and he just held it to his chest and he walked away with it so tight to his chest. And I think we all had tears in our eyes seeing the 7th great grandson of this Patriot take this flag that had just been folded and just hold it to his chest like he was so proud of it and walk away. So that was really neat. Once we finished with that part of the event, you're near the end of the ceremony and you do a musket and rifle salute, or a 3-round salute. So they're going to fire their guns 3 rounds. And so everyone got up. It, like I said, it was just a light drizzle that day. So we all headed outside and we stood there for this. And another part of the planning process, because if you're having the SAR and the color guard and there's going to be a gun salute, you probably should contact your local sheriff's department. So I had someone in my chapter take care of this for me, and it's just a phone call to let them know that they may hear guns fired and what's going on. And usually it's never a problem, but it's just a good idea in your planning to add that to your list of things to do. After the gun salute happens, then you have the sounding of taps. And of course, that's always touching and a very nice way, solemn way to end the ceremony. So you have tap sounded, your ceremony's over. We do usually have refreshments, and we encourage people to go in and have refreshments and stay and chat a bit. And that's the end of the day. You have your cleanup. Chairs, sometimes you have chairs that you've brought out. In this case, because we used the church, there were no chairs to put away. But a lot of times we have 100 folding chairs, and we thought we would, and that was something that the Civil Air Patrol cadets would have handled for us. So you want to make sure you have help in putting chairs away if you need to wipe them off and do that. We vacuumed the church really well because we wanted it to be just the way it was when we got there that day. And so there was still a little bit of cleanup. It wasn't a great deal, but we did have cleanup. And then I usually come home and I have a sigh of relief, and I take a few days off where I don't do anything. And then I know that I still have a few more things I need to do. So I print my pictures of the event. I print extra brochures, and I print anything, newspaper articles. Maybe I had it advertised in the Boone County Recorder or another paper. I have copies of that, and I make stacks, and I send a set of these items to National Society Daughters of the American Revolution so that they have this for their records. They can document that this grave marking ceremony or marker dedication ceremony happened. I send our state DAR, I send them copies of the event, and then I make a copy for my chapter so that 50 years from now, chapter members can pull this out and know what our chapter did October 30th, 2021. It's nice to have an article written following the event on what happened that day. I've had members of the chapter write an article up and submitted it to DAR's national magazine, and it was put in there, and that was really nice. I usually send out some thank you cards to the guest speakers, to whoever we get to sing at the event. So there's a few things to do there. And then doing an event like this. This is a follow-up from my event. And so I want to share this news. A lot of work went into it. I want to honor John Swindle, and I want my community to know about the history that we have in our community. And so I've put at the bottom of the screen, if you're interested in membership in the DAR, I'm the chapter registrar. I help people with their applications and research. A lot of people don't think they had anyone who served, but you'd be surprised. Almost everyone has someone who served in the Revolutionary War. So there is my email address, and I'd be happy to help you if you contact me. So I will end my PowerPoint here and see what questions we have.
Yeah, if we want to go over the trivia question real quick first. It was, which popular game show has been filmed at the DAR's national headquarters? And the winner, we did have a winner. The answer was Jeopardy, and congratulations to Mary Pearson for winning that.
Congratulations, Mary.
Yeah. Then we do have a couple questions. The first one was from Frederick Warren, which somebody did answer in the chat, but I don't know if you want to expand on it. It was, what is Germana?
Okay, so that is I could almost do a program on what is Germana, but there is the Germana Foundation that is in Virginia. It's in Culpeper. The Hebron Lutheran Church is in Madison County, Virginia. They're very close to each other, but I'm going to get my dates a little off. In the early 1700s, and someone can probably answer this in the chat, there were two different groups of Germans that came to America, and the first group came over, and then a second group came over, I believe in 1715 or 1714. The second group of Germans came, and they were actually headed to Pennsylvania. but Governor Spotswood wanted Germans. They were knowledgeable about mining, and he wanted them there. And the captain of their ship owed some money, and he worked out a deal with Governor Spotswood. So the Germans that thought they were going to Pennsylvania actually ended up in Culpeper, Virginia, and they were indentured for 7 years. And after their indenture was up, they went to Madison County and they established Hebron Lutheran Church in Madison County. And then in the early 1800s, I believe it was 1805, a group from the Hebron Lutheran Church in Madison County, Virginia, came here to Kentucky and started the Hopeful Lutheran Church. So that's just a little bit about them. Some of my dates might be a little off, but that's the basics. And there is a very active Germana Foundation. They're great. They have a database. If you join, you get access to their database, and I encourage anyone who's a Germana descendant to become a member. I'm actually going to be going. I'm a Germana descendant. I don't descend from John Swindle, but I have a Germana ancestor. And next summer in June, I'm going on a trip to Germany through the Germana Foundation, and it takes you, it's an ancestry or a genealogy trip, and we will visit all the churches that our ancestors attended. They find out those who are going on the trip, who their ancestors were, and the trip is built around, the itinerary is built on those ancestors. So I'll get to go into the churches that my ancestors attended in Germany, which is so cool.
And then our next question was from Sage Barr, and it was, are the different colored uniforms from different armies or like sections of the military? Like,
absolutely. So there are who actually do presentations uniforms mean, and I don't know a lot about them, but I do know that they all have meaning to them. And the SAR, they try to be historically accurate with the uniforms they wear. And so they do. They, like I said, whether you were in Virginia or in the militia, or whether you were part of the Continental Army, that's what those uniforms, they're different and they look like based on that. There are actually books that you could even buy that tell you what the different uniforms look like and represented.
And then Patty Kaiser asked, what do we know about John Swindle?
So most of what we know about John Swindle, a lot of it's from his pension record. And if you have an ancestor who served, I encourage you to try to find out if they had a pension record, because there's so much information packed in pension records. And actually today I made a few notes. I reviewed John Swindle's pension record again because I wanted to be able to talk about it. So 3 different times John Swindle served, and the first time he was called to serve was in 1778. And in his pension record, he said that he served under Captain Hill and that he marched to the Albemarle barracks where he guarded British soldiers. And he served for a couple of months at that time. I think maybe a year went by that he was dismissed, but then he was called back. He was drafted again. And the second time I was reading the pension record today, and some of them are very difficult to read, and I couldn't understand everything I was reading, but he was somewhere in Virginia and he was guarding again the second time. The third time he was called to serve was in 1781, and he said that he actually marched to York, and he said he was discharged right before Cornwallis's surrender. So there are some Swindle descendants in the program tonight, and they may even know more. He lived a lot of his life there in Madison County, Virginia, and he had 6 children. I know that at least 2 of his children, his daughters, they remained in Boone County and they married and stayed here. His sons, I believe that most of them left. I think that they might have gone to Missouri. I know that they went west, and like I said, feel free to chime in and put in the chat room if you know this, but he had several sons who went west. And he also spent some time in South Carolina. He left Virginia, and I believe he was in South Carolina for a short time before he came to Boone County. But it was here where he applied for his pension, and he passed away, and then his wife applied for her husband's pension, and she was approved. Are there any other questions?
There aren't any in the chat right now. If anybody has some questions, feel free to put them in. Kathy Swindle said Solomon Commodore was in North Carolina, then moved to Georgia.
I'm not sure who he is.
Was he a farmer?
Oh, okay. So Solomon was his son. I have not looked up the names of all of John Swindle's sons. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. I assume that John Swindle was a farmer. I don't know that for certain. He died before the 1850 census. You know, in the census records, we can sometimes see their occupation, and I have not looked John Swindle up in the tax records, but I would assume that he was a farmer. So John spent time in North Carolina, and if I said South Carolina, it might have been, maybe it was North Carolina that he was in before coming to Kentucky.
Do you want to tell us anything about how you got into being in the DAR and how you found out about your relative in the Revolutionary War?
Well, I have always loved history. I have a bachelor's in education from Northern Kentucky University, and I've just always loved history. And probably around 2012, I started getting maybe even a little bit earlier, I started getting interested in genealogy and doing some research. And, you know, you start building that tree, you start working on your ancestry, and then I'm not sure, I don't even remember how I had heard about DAR, but I remember getting to the point in my tree where I thought I had an ancestor who served in the Revolutionary War. And I was just so excited, and I thought I can be in the DAR. And so it ended up being a little work. It wasn't quite as easy as I thought it would be. I thought I could just let someone know I had an ancestor that served in the Revolutionary War, but then I found out that I really needed to prove it. And so that was a challenge for me. And I started researching really researching and trying to collect documents, and all I can say is this is what I was meant to do, because I enjoy it. I love, I'm the chapter registrar. I love researching genealogy. Like you said, I worked for the library as a local history associate, and I just love what I do, and planning these ceremonies have been an honor.
We do have a question from Sage again about what is the next one about next week. We won't have one next week, but December 1st, and it's with Jason Gross of Boone County Distillery. So that would be next week's. Does anybody have any more questions? I think we might have time for one more. Maybe one or two.
Thank you all for attending. I appreciate it. Like I said, I love this, love doing genealogy research. I'm happy to be able to use what I've learned and my skills to help people join DAR, and also to organize events like this.
Yeah, and if there's no more questions for tonight, then we can wrap it up. Thank you for joining us. Thanks again to all of our sponsors and supporters of BCM. We want to thank the staff, the trustees, and the members of the Behringer-Crawford Museum. Like I said before, if you're not yet a member, you can find out how to become a member at bcmuseum.org. For more Northern Kentucky history throughout the week, you can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, where you can find the latest installment of our curators chat with our curator of collections, Jason French. Jason's great at what he does, shares tons of history, so you guys will all enjoy those. And there's also other videos on those channels. Please like and subscribe. We will not, like I said before, be having Northern Kentucky History Hour next week because we're continuing our bi-weekly schedule, but we will be back on December 1st with Jason Gross from the Boone County Distillery. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of your night.